People still ask me about Paris, about the accident, about becoming number one. Those are the things most people remember, and I understand why. But when I look back now, there are other memories that stay with me just as clearly. There was one man I never beat, not once. There was another I considered a friend until I moved ahead of him in the rankings, and something between us changed. And there was one man I could look at across the net and admit something most players hate admitting. He was better than me. That is the part people do not always ask about. Tennis is not only about the trophies you win. Sometimes it is about the men who made you feel tired, frustrated, helpless, or simply not good enough. I had 5 opponents like that. 5 men who found 5 very different ways to get inside my game, and some of them got much deeper than that. I built my game around one simple belief. If the match became long, ugly, and uncomfortable, I trusted myself to stay there longer than the other man. I did not need the tennis to look beautiful. I wanted one more ball, one more game, one more hour if that was what it took. That was especially true on clay. I felt comfortable when the legs got heavy and the rallies became difficult. A lot of players wanted those matches to end. I usually wanted them to keep going because I believed that sooner or later the other man would start looking for a way out. For years, that belief carried me through some of the hardest matches of my career. Then I started facing players who did not want a way out either. They were willing to stay in the same pain with me point after point, and that changed everything. One of them made me understand something I did not enjoy admitting. My own game could feel very different when somebody used it against me. Number 1, Sergi Bruguera. There was one thing I hated about playing Sergi. He never went away. I could push him wide, make the rally longer, make him run one more time, and he would still be there. I was used to waiting for the other man to slow down. With Sergi, that moment often never came. After a while, I realized something I did not like. He was doing to me what I had spent years doing to everyone else. That was what made those matches so hard. They were not really about one big shot or one clever tactic. They were about who could stay in the pain longer. Some of our matches went 3 hours, sometimes 4. By the end, you felt it everywhere. In your legs, in your lungs. Even the next morning when you try to get out of bed. There were times after playing Sergi when I could barely move properly for a couple days. Miami stayed with me for another reason. 8 years earlier, that city had almost taken tennis away from me after the accident. Then I came back there and found Sergi on the other side of the court, testing my body in exactly the way I had always tested everybody else. That was the strange part. I was healthy again, I was strong again, but for once, endurance was not something I owned. Sergi could keep coming back until I started asking myself the same question I had spent years forcing other players to ask. Who was going to break first? Usually, I liked that question. Against Sergi, I was never completely sure. He could hurt my body, but the next man gave me something worse. I never found an answer for him. Number 2, Stefan Edberg. I never beat Stefan Edberg, not once. So, people forget that sometimes, but I don't. It did not matter where we played. Hard court, indoors, even clay. That last one bothered me most. Because clay was the place where I usually believed I could find an answer sooner or later. With Stefan, I never did. The reason was simple. He never gave me enough time to play the kind of tennis I wanted. I wanted the rally to grow, to make the point heavier, to force one more ball out of the other man. Stefan would not let it get there. Before I could settle into the rally, he was already moving forward. Before I could make the point uncomfortable, he was at the net. I remember playing him in Vienna, late in both our careers. It was home for me. The crowd was with me, and by then I knew his game very well. I remember thinking, if there is ever going to be a day when I finally beat him, this has to be it. It wasn't. He beat me again, calmly, almost like nothing had changed. That is what stayed with me. You spend years believing every problem can be solved. If you keep working, keep fighting, keep looking for another way, then one player keeps putting the same problem in front of you, and every time you still have no answer. Against Stefan, I kept waiting for that answer. It never came. That frustrated me, but at least it was still tennis. The next rivalry was different. That one became personal. Number 3, Agassi. Andre was different. because for a while I considered him a friend. We respected each other. We talked. There was no real problem between us, and I thought that mattered more than where either of us happened to be in the rankings. Then I became number one, and something changed. Andre started saying publicly that I did not belong near the top on anything except clay. I could understand the tennis argument. Players disagree about rankings all the time. What bothered me was how quickly the friendship seemed to cool. When I was behind him, we were fine. Then I moved ahead, and suddenly we weren't. That stayed with me because it was not something I could explain with a scoreboard. On court, Andre was always difficult. He took the ball early and gave me very little time to settle into the kind of point I wanted. That part was fair. That was tennis. You win, you lose, you shake hands, and you move on. What was harder was feeling that one number had changed something outside the court. I remember thinking, disagree with the ranking if you want, say I am better on clay, say whatever you believe, but do not let that erase what was there before. Maybe that sounds small now. It did not feel small then. Losing a match is clean. There is a score, there is a winner, there is a loser. Then it is over. A friendship changing is different. There is no scoreboard for that, and no trophy really fixes it. I could live with losing to Andre. Losing the friendship was harder, and after that, tennis gave me a different kind of test. This time, it was not about friendship. It was about whether my body had anything left at all. Number 4, Boris Becker. Monte Carlo is the match I remember most. The day before, I had played a brutal semi-final in the heat. By the end, I was badly dehydrated. My blood sugar had dropped, and afterward, I was in the medical room, barely able to stand. Less than a day later, I had to play Boris in the final. You could see I was tired, and he came out aggressively. He took the first 2 sets, and at that point, I was not thinking about winning. I was trying to stay in the match and hoping my body would give me something. Then he had match point. One more point, and it was over. I remember standing there thinking, this is it. My body had already told me to stop, and I really believed I was finished. Then Boris missed, and somehow one point became another. I found a little more energy, then a little more after that. I still do not know where it came from. Maybe adrenaline, maybe stubbornness, maybe I simply stopped listening to what my body was telling me. The strange thing is, I did not suddenly feel good. I was still tired, I was still empty, the pain was still there. I just kept playing, and little by little, the match started to move in another direction. In the end, I won. People asked me afterward how I had done it. I never had a clever answer, because I honestly did not know. I still do not. That is why Boris stays with me. He took me to the point where I was sure there was nothing left, and somehow I found out there was still something there. My body had already said no, but I was still standing. Boris taught me that sometimes fighting is enough. Pete Sampras taught me something much harder. Sometimes it isn't. Number 5, Pete Sampras. Pete was better than me. I knew it, and I do not have a problem saying that now. The truth is, I did not really have a problem saying it then either. With most players, I always felt there was a way into the match. Maybe I had to suffer for a while. Maybe I had to stay out there for 3 hours. But usually, I believed I could find something. With Pete, sometimes there was nothing to find. His serve could take the point away before I had a chance to make the match uncomfortable. You stood there, guessed. When I was younger, I thought a career was easy to measure. You won matches, collected trophies, moved up the rankings, and that told you where you stood. At the time, I believed that was enough. I do not see it that way anymore. Some of the matches I remember most are not the ones I won. They are the ones that showed me something I did not want to see. A weakness, a limit, a problem I could not fix, no matter how hard I worked. That is the truth about those 5 men. I did not solve all of them, and I did not beat all of them. When you are young, that can feel like failure. Later you look at it differently. You start to understand that a career is also shaped by the people who forced you to be honest with yourself. The ones who made you change. The ones who made you doubt. The ones who showed you that fighting harder was not always the answer. It took me a long time to accept that. Maybe that is why those names stayed with me. Not because they made my career smaller, but because they showed me exactly where my game ended and where someone else could keep going. Looking back, there is still one thing that makes this list difficult. Stefan Edberg was the man I never solved. Pete Sampras was the man I believe was better than me. Those are not really the same thing. One left me without an answer. The other showed me a level I could not always reach. So which one was tougher? I'm not sure there is a clean answer. The scoreboard can tell you who won the match. It can tell you how many sets you lost, how many titles you won, where you finished in the rankings. What it cannot always tell you is who stayed in your head after everything was over. Maybe that is why people who watch that era will remember it differently. Some will say Stefan, some will say Pete. Others may choose someone else completely, and maybe that is the point. The hardest opponent is not always the man with the biggest name. Sometimes it is simply the one you still think about years later. People still remember the titles, the clay, Paris, the comeback, the #1 ranking. I remember all of that too. But years later, some other memories stay just as clear. Sometimes it is not the trophy you remember first. It is the man on the other side of the net. The one who would not get tired, the one you could never solve. The friendship that changed, the match you thought was already over. The player who made you understand that sometimes your best still was not enough. That is the part nobody really tells you when you are young. You think the victories will stay with you forever, and some of them do. But the questions stay too. Pete was the man I believed was better than me. Stefan was the man I never figured out. Even now, I'm not sure which one was harder to accept. Maybe there is no perfect answer. You remember the men you beat. But sometimes, the ones you never quite solved stay with you longer.